Through the agenda today, approve the subjects of future subcommittee meetings, and I'm hoping that we can approve the draft rules and operating procedures. I have some changes that I'd like to suggest. Other members may also have changes they would like to suggest. But if we can make some decisions, adopt this as the draft we're working from, subject to what we may do in these subsequent meetings that will focus on a specific topic. We could, I think, distribute it to the other members of the board so they'd have a chance to look at it and give us any feedback they might want to have. If that's agreeable to the other members, does anybody have anything that they would like to change, or is there general approval of the topics that have been set forward for future meetings?
And that's the pink tab.
Okay. And let me, I would like to clarify that under the third subcommittee hearing, the appeals process would also cover reconsideration.
It's on the third subcommittee. I'm proposing appeals
it does.
And reconsideration.
You're right.
And then the one thing I would like to clarify is on number 2, that part A where it says officer/vice chair, it should just say officers of the board.
Okay, that would be good. Mr. Harvey?
Thank you. I have no objection to these as potential subjects. I will recognize that all the good work Ms. Kaplan does will include, I'm sure, references to statutory and or regulatory constructs that may affect these discussion items so that we have some guidance as we discuss them.
I will do that.
Would there be a motion then that we adopt?
I just have one question. So under number 2, we said officers. Are we striking vice chair then?
Well, I just wanted to be inclusive because it looks like when I say officer/vice chair, I'm leaving out the chair. I just want to include officers of the board because you have officers are the chair and the vice chair.
Okay. And we currently have a vice chair.
Yes, you are allowed to have a vice chair. If the board so chooses, they can select a vice chair.
We haven't been.
No, you haven't been.
Okay, and so this provision is as a result of history that we could have a vice chair, or as a result of Mason's rules of order?
It's as a result of history and policy as adopted by the State Allocation Board. You did have a prior vice chair. Senator Jack Scott was the vice chair. And what I was intending with this subcommittee was kind of like the selection, or what's the process, or does the board wish to then, after this discussion, have no vice chair?
Okay, well then I'm great with that. I just wanted to be sure that either I was completely lost or that I had completely forgotten. Probably neither. Very good. Okay, so I would like to make a motion to accept the schedule, under the pink tab with Rules and Procedures Subcommittee. And
second.
Great. Call the roll, please. Madam Secretary.
I can, if need be, I can do that because I got the mic. Hancock?
Okay. Aye.
Fuller?
Aye.
Harvey? Aye. Brownlee? Absent.
Okay, so
3-0.
moving on to the basic document here, which was the draft.
The blue tab. And also what I put in front of you, Assemblywoman Fuller and Scott, I was able to give that to you, is there's a title that said Senator Hancock suggested changes. I know I got the requested changes that Senator Hancock would like to talk about. So as to probably going forward and referencing this document as we move forward might make it easier when we look at changes, because her suggested changes are outlined in bold on this document.
Okay. Did you want to make a presentation, Ms. Kaplan? or
I
do
can,
we just
sure,
go
I
through
can
it?
give a brief background. As you know, this was first started before I was the Assistant Executive Officer. There was a small group of the chair, Tom Sheehy, former Executive Officer, Rob Cook, Susan Ronback, the former AEO, and some OPSC staff that got together and looked at Assembly rules, Senate rules, Roberts and Masons, and compiled a base general operating rules and procedures. I have since taken that document based off of our last subcommittee meeting of wanting to use Senate rules with Masons as a backup and then have specific sections that will address issues unique to the State Allocation Board, of which then we can seek direction on. And so that's what I did, and you will find in areas that are kind of highlighted or shaded in a different color, those are more than likely going to be subject of a future subcommittee meeting, because we know reconsideration and appeals process will, be a meeting in and of itself. And so most of the issues, I was hoping that we could go through and either find agreement on, or if there is disagreement, hash that out. And then what I would do is, based on direction given by this subcommittee, is seek information from the rest of the board to see how they feel upon it, add those in, and come back at the next subcommittee hearing that we have for either adoption or not, and then pull on to the full board for adoption.
Okay, so let's see how quickly we can move through this. Recognizing that we're talking about the basic skeleton, we agreed, I think, that we would use Masons as a default, and that we would, since many of us from local government are a little used to Roberts, try to codify some things from that, but with Masons as the default. I have gone through this document. It seems to me that it's basically fine, and that certainly in shape to be adopted as a draft and sent forward, just so other board members can have it for their information and take a look at it. I did have several suggestions that I would like to make, and then if other board members have suggestions they would like to make, maybe we could get them on the table and talk about them. On, I guess it's page 2 of what we have here, which starts with officers. I simply, under agenda, where it says any SAB member request to put something on the agenda must be made to a variety of people no less than 30 calendar days before the meeting. I think that is too long.
I'm sorry, where is this?
Well,
I
the
apologize.
pages
I did
aren't
not put pages on Senator Hancock. So if you look at the very first one, is the first page is just the background, and then page 2 starts where it looks like this, where it talks about officers, meetings, and agenda. And Senator Hancock, if we actually,
I see. So I'm gonna. It's okay. I'm gonna be able to put these things side by side. Okay. So it's where, we're looking at the page that's headed proposed rules and operating procedures.
Go to your blue tab, and then go.
because what I handed out to you and the blue tab are actually the exact same thing. It's just Senator Hancock. They have your notes.
Okay. Bolding. Took me a long time to get that.
Madam Chair, since I have a question on meetings, which is above agenda, can we
yes.
start and do it sequentially?
Yeah, why don't we just get them all on the table so we get a sense?
So can we actually start? It would help for me in taking notes to make sure if we went through, if we agreed on officers, sign that off, and then go to meetings, and then go to agendas.
I would rather have one motion to adopt.
Okay.
And so if we just have an idea of the scope of any changes people might like to make. So, Mr. Harvey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm looking at meeting sub-paragraph D, quorum. Mm-hmm. The last sentence therein says a majority of the quorum may act on any matter. That would mean 4 members of the board could act. I respectfully believe it should always be 6. That is the.
I totally agree with you.
So I recommend that we strike that sentence.
Actually, that was my mistake. It should read, "A quorum may act on any member," so you strike majority of the. It should just read, "A quorum may act on any matter."
That clarifies it. That would be 6, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, consensus on that one. I had a suggested change under agenda. I think that no less than 30 days to ask for something to be placed on the agenda is too long, because typically if a member places something on the agenda, it will have to be referred to staff for another 30 days. And if a member places a concern on the agenda, there doesn't really need to be a staff report on that unless staff can pull together some comments. So it would seem to me that a member should be able to place something on the agenda with 15 days, 2 weeks notice, so we can just move ahead.
May I have a comment on that?
Yeah.
I think staff has done a wonderful job in giving us a better framework to work from relative to our agenda. What I mean by that is now bringing forward in a more official way our 90-day calendar, which gives us the option to move things depending on our preferences, but also smooths out the workload. The only thing I would suggest here, and I want to think about the 15-day and ask if it works with all the noticing requirements, but I would ask that we have something in here that allows the chair to recognize or consider the 90-day calendar, so that we don't end up once again front-loading things and therefore not having adequate times to discuss. If it's important, it goes on, but something less important might go to a 60 or 90-day time frame. I just think it helps us get through our work in an efficient manner and doesn't clog the calendar. If you just consider it.
Mr. Harvey, I am not familiar with the 60 and 90-day calendar.
We have had now, I think last month was the last time it was separately made part of the executive director's report, and it said, going forward, 30 months out, 60 months out, 90 days out, here are the things that I believe, listening to you, should be scheduled as a board for discussion. And it gives us an opportunity to kind of see what the matters are, and if we frankly disagree that something staff thinks should be at 90 days, we can say, wait a minute, we want to hear it next month, but let's move item Z from the 30-day proposed calendar, drop it back. It was a tool to give predictability, transparency, and us an opportunity to manage the agenda so that these things don't just come up with 10 days notice. We have an idea of what's contemplated. So we really haven't wrestled with it. I think last month, Senator, was the first time it was on our agenda, and I believe it's something that both our executive officer and assistant executive officer have input on, and it's something we will bring forward every month. Ms. Jones, am I misstating it? I mean, that's how I recall it and the purpose of it.
You are correct in that, and we also index that on our 10-day notice. So any changes that any member would request through the executive officer or the assistant executive officer to be on that agenda would have to meet the Bagley-Keene meeting notice requirements, and that's
72 hours.
10 days.
10 days.
10 days in advance.
Okay. Well, I would still like it to be 15 days, because a subsection of the executive report, do you then decide whether or not that should be on the 90 days? I mean, I think board members don't typically bring forward a lot of concerns. There have been some that honestly would never have gotten pushed if a board member hadn't brought it forward. These, as you know, the discussions go on for months. So I just think to have somebody have to do something in April and then you can't even see it until May, we're just off into something that isn't timely. So I would prefer just to have it placed on the agenda for consideration and referral, or board members could decide they don't want to deal with that topic and they could go away. But I do think that I've never served on any body where there was a 30-day requirement like that. Ms. Fuller?
I agree with your expediency argument. I'm trying to decide, though, how it might work. Help me understand this. I think I'd be okay with it if we were, like, at a board meeting, we direct them to put it on, and the next board meeting is 14 days away or something like that. That doesn't bother me, because I think the public then gets noticed of what it is, and staff all gets noticed, so they have a chance to bring you up. What I'm concerned about would be if, like, mid-month, somebody brings something up to put it on, and nobody was on notice that it was coming up, and it affected somebody's school district or whatever that wasn't there. Like, how would they know to get there for the next meeting? And that's my concern, is that the 30 days allows people to travel, and a lot of these people have to travel. When I was a superintendent, I spent a lot of time watching to see when this stuff would come up, and you would think to look at it during the board meeting, but you wouldn't think during the middle of the month to look at it if there was something new. So how do we qualify it? I agree, the board members should be able to put stuff on. How do we qualify it so that if it's something that the public may need people to come speak to it, that they are noticed and they give enough time? Because by this, let's say 15 days, okay, we give it to staff, let's say 10 days go by, staff gets it sort of on quickly, maybe they get around to all the members, but then they put a notice out in 5 days, and the school district can go by so quickly. How would the school district know to get here? Would we do special notification to all the people on that item? Or maybe we could put it where you can do with information, you can put it on as an item that's coming up soon, that people then knew. I mean, to me, it's like, how do we get the timing? Since we only meet once a month, since school districts only expect to look once a month,
right?
How do we, if we do something 15 days, it's off the cycle, how do we give everybody the opportunity to be there that wants to be there when we don't even know who it is that wants to be there?
Well, that's a good point.
How many days before we actually have a meeting is the meeting posted so the public's aware?
10 days.
A minimum of 10 days.
Minimum 10. So it has to be indexed and on that notice to even have a discussion. Otherwise, it can come up at the end of the meeting where members during public comment can request an item to come up for discussion or action at the next month.
So if we closed one meeting and there was 15 days, there would be certainly time in order to agendize that particular topic and giving the 10-day notice. Now, it might be a problem in terms of what staff needs to do to fully vet and prepare an item, but I think it could certainly, we could have that item on there, and as Lonnie said, we could discuss it. It would be made public, it would be noticed, we could discuss it, and it might be that the board deems it an unnecessary thing for us to talk about and just dispense with it, or it could be something that this is, something kind of comprehensive and big, and if it was something that was comprehensive and big, we would recognize that in the discussion, and then we would, I think, collectively sort of make a decision that, we're going to need at least, the next month to prepare this, or we're going to, in Mr. Harvey's 30, 60, 90 format, we might decide, what category that actually goes in terms of getting the preparation time needed.
I think there will really not be an issue if an item is brought up at a board meeting for future discussion, because then you have the work plan right there and you can decide where it fits in. Where it may be something that runs in where Assemblywoman Fuller, you brought up, is if a specific board member maybe calls the chair and says, we really need to have this item, we really need to discuss this item. The chair does review the agenda, sometimes puts things on and off, does have that discretion. If it's a single appeal district item, the district would be aware, but if it's a bigger policy, I think that's where it may run into concerns that you've addressed. So, I mean, if we want to get into specific detail of 15 days not discussed at a public board meeting, you can put something on where it may be a district appeal. But if there's otherwise 15 days if noticed at a board meeting is fine.
Well, it says here that a request made outside of a meeting must be approved by both the chair and, if we had a vice chair. So the chair could, at their discretion, also, I would also maybe suggest adding at sentence 1 that any member may request to put an item on the SAB agenda for consideration and referral.
Right.
Because we're not saying we're going to make,
I like
just,
Yeah,
In other words, we won't necessarily vote.
that's right.
exactly.
That's right.
That it covers,
Just to,
But we would discuss it.
Right.
And the
Yeah.
public would be noticed that we were discussing
And
it.
then put it on the calendar for
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Oh,
right. Okay, so should we, okay, can we just do this by consensus then?
I think just add what you just said.
Just add for consideration and referral and
After SAB.
and change 15 to
Just add
30.
to the discussion on the agenda, this section, do we need to,
Oh, wait. Okay, so did she finish her?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, so we've got
So-
yours added on.
For
At the very end,
consideration and
the item on the
referral.
SAB agenda for consideration and referral period. And then did we decide whether we were going to agree to 30 or go down to 15?
Yeah, because we're making clear we do not expect extensive staff work. We're just going to have a little informal discussion and see if we want to refer it or what. Yeah,
But it wouldn't be a vote.
no.
Yeah. I think that's great. Okay. Because what I was worried about was the chair and the vice chair on our regular committees are bipartisan. The chair and the vice chair, we don't know how the vice chair is going to be picked, so I don't know how it works. I was like, well, that takes care of the whole thing. Thank you. Good job. All right.
I'm just wondering if we have to be more explicit about, in terms of the chair and the vice chair, somehow working collectively or collaboratively in terms of developing the agenda, or does this just suffice?
Well, we're going to actually discuss officers of the board and what they might do at another one of our meetings. Before you got here, we unanimously approved the kind of laying out the subcommittee, but hold that thought.
So I think
That's
is
a
what we
very
could
good
do is under
point.
duties, when we do the officers, is what I could do is have agenda topic of discussion for how would that work?
Yeah, something like that. Okay. Anything else on that page, or moving along to the next page? Reconsideration, we were going to discuss at a future agenda. The final arbitrator overrules disputes. Ms. Kaplan has suggested that the final arbiter may be Greg Schmidt, who is the parliamentarian who presides over Masons in the Senate. I think that he would be agreeable to do that if we wanted him to do that. Hopefully, we would not have a whole lot of disputes once we had rules. But how do people feel about that, Mr. Harvey?
I'd like to offer some consideration. To me, the final arbiter should be the counsel that the board respects and trusts. And I'm going to suggest that our chair or whomever is the best messenger ask the Attorney General to be the staff attorney to our board. To me, the arbiter should be on-site, should be part of the discussion, should be able to render a decision perhaps in a timely fashion. If we had to rely on someone as talented as Mr. Schmidt, it could be 2 or 3 weeks or who knows when. So to me, you have as your counsel someone who is that objective voice. And I would offer that we consider having the AG as our counsel.
Comments? Well, let me just ask for clarification. Would this be, the person themselves or a designee?
It would be a DAG. It would be someone who the Attorney General would assign to our board.
Would they have to come to every single
They
meeting?
would come to every meeting. They would become the board's attorney. And I'll be very candid here. There are times when folk have suggested that how can a DGS attorney be objective? Now, while I disagree with that, if that becomes a stumbling block for board consideration of an opinion or advice, I would say remove that impediment or appearance and allow us to pick someone who the board may or may not be more comfortable with. And I was just offering the AG as that voice, not discrediting Mr. Schmidt, but I was more concerned about the person as the arbiter missing the session, missing the discussion, and then not in a timely fashion giving us a rendering.
Well, that would be fine with me. I mean, other members?
Well, I mean, I'm sort of, well, first of all, I think the first thing, response to that is that how much is that going to cost us? And I think that Greg Schmidt or like blanking on the person on our side, Dotson on our side is, I mean, that's what they do. I mean, that's what their primary role and responsibility is to make sure that the rules are followed and so forth and so on. So that's their expertise. That's what they know. They're usually on site. Now, we might have later meetings where they wouldn't be available if we got into some kind of dispute. But it seems to me that if we really got into a dispute where we would actually need to call them into the room to figure it out, which happens occasionally in committees, but it doesn't happen very often, that, it's taped, it's recorded, it's something I think that could easily be looked at and rendered upon, for the next meeting, because I don't think it's going to happen that often.
Any other comments? I can go actually either way on this. I think that your points are well taken. Also,
just a couple things for consideration. I think there might be, as Mr. Harvey brought up, maybe two things for the board to look at. One, the board, if in these rules and adopted procedures decides Greg Schmidt should be an arbiter, he could come in, consult, and then the board, if they so choose, can then vote on that or use him as the final. And then second, what Mr. Harvey brought up is there has been concerns about potential conflict of interest, objectivity of having a DGS attorney as the staff board attorney, and is this subcommittee willing to consider having an attorney general designee as the actual official board attorney to the SAB, maybe upon approval by the SAB members so that they feel comfortable with that designee. Now, Mr. Harvey, correct me if I'm wrong, do we not also pay for the DGS attorney, so it would be the same thing?
Of course we pay. I don't know what the assessment is, and as Chair Hancock has alluded, we obviously have to reimburse the DAG, and I don't know what the delta is or if they are the same.
Yeah, and I guess the question is, are we talking about the AG that replaces the DGS attorney, or are we talking about both?
It would be a replacement under my suggestion.
Well, I think this is a bigger issue that maybe we should discuss, have some more time to think about and
Well, it
discuss.
actually is there. It's under attorney opinions.
Yeah, because I do believe that it overlaps with another issue, which is the whole
I wondered what attorney opinions.
attorney selection process. And once we solve the attorney selection process, I think this item would clear up a little bit. So maybe we want to hold that particular item open until after we finish the attorney part.
Yeah, why don't we mark it as we are flagged that as one of the to be filled in? Is the question then I would ask the subcommittee is an attorney's opinions about, like, if what we are doing is legal, and different from asking for a confirmation of the rules. It seems to me that, just thinking back, that there were some times when we got opinions on, you can't do that, that's illegal, and there were times when nobody knew what was the proper procedure.
It would have been simpler if it was the same or not. I think we're going to have staff answer that question for us, because I don't know how else to find that answer.
I think we've done the right thing by saying we'll trail it to the fourth.
And the
committee.
last thing is that we might want, in most committees, we might want the chair to be the arbitrator of rules, but if they get to a certain point, the chair then could decide whether it was the attorney or Greg. We make it either option. Ultimately, the chair is the person that's supposed to sort of run the committee, and the chair, obviously running the for all of us, when we run our committees, running the rules is a big part of that, right?
Right.
So if we take the rules completely out of the chair's hands and give it to some attorney or the attorney general or someone else, maybe we just need to make a two-tier thing, that it can be the chair based on the book, or the chair can refer it to whomever.
I do think the people that work in the Senate and the Assembly are really experts in this area. We always subject ourselves to potentially having a lawyer that's not necessarily an expert in the area either.
Yeah, I think that's very convincing for a question of what really do the rules say. Again, as opposed to if you put public money into this, you're violating the law, whatever that might be, right? So I do think they're two different things, and it's also true that under Roberts, again, which most of us are familiar with, and I'm not sure what Masons would actually say about this, but under Roberts, the chair makes a ruling, and the body can overrule the chair.
Maybe we should have Masons look.
But I think knowing the rules would answer that question.
Right.
We wouldn't need a lawyer to help us to interpret that rule. The rule would be there, and we would know it. And I think that there are just times when, whether it's Masons or Roberts or the Brown Act or whatever, there's always, some gray area where it goes to litigation. But I don't think
We haven't ever gotten there,
Yeah.
which is good.
It is good.
Okay. Well, I would suggest that we hold this over them, but that we do flag we're talking about two things.
Yes.
One is, because I think Mr. Harvey's suggestion that we at least approach the Attorney General's office, and if we're reimbursing and it's roughly the same amount of money, that would be a good thing to do. And we might also want to ask one of our parliamentarians to be on standby, in the probably, once a year occasion when we might not understand the rules that we adopt. Does that? Okay. So.
And we're still considering Greg too, and that's noted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
So, I did have one other item. I didn't understand why we needed the limit of setting of SAB agenda items. When I think of an agenda item,
on the
I
next
think,
page.
oh,
Next
well,
subject is to be...
the next subject, yeah, it's the very next subject. Because, again, I think of things like seismic safety has appeared on the agenda about 10 times before we ever got to the point that the Office of the State Architect said they needed more money before they could give us a definition. Well, what if it had appeared 3 times and then it goes away? I don't think that's the way we operate.
Where does it say that?
At the top.
Okay, limit on setting ZAB agenda items. And it says SAB items may be set on the ZAB agenda no more than 3 times.
I see.
Unless new information is available that shall aid in the resolution, etc. Unless there are all these different things. And,
Well, I think what they're trying to get at there is that if, I want an item on the agenda, we discuss the item, it gets dispensed with, and then I come back and say, I want it back on the agenda again. And, the board doesn't really want it, and they dispense with it. And then I put it on the third time. They're saying you can't do that more than 3 times, right? Or is it, because the earthquake stuff, it was like wasn't it always on there? We just never chose one way or the other to discuss
And
it?
we kind of asked for new information and that kind of thing.
If you continue something, then I wouldn't think that counts as a set.
It doesn't. What the intent, in my understanding, is this was first drafted by Mr. Sheehy, Rob Cook, Susan, and some OPSC members, was that this was, if an item kind of where Assemblywoman Brownlee brought up, if it's on and it kind of gets decided but keep coming back up without any new information or anything that would change, that's the limit on setting an agenda item. But if an agenda item's on 3 times and the board never gets to it, then that was never discussed, it was never decided, so the limit on setting it would not apply. And then, it's one of those things, like we could discuss construction cost index over and over, but there could be each meeting new information that aids in the decision of handling the issue, and so that wouldn't make it subject. As long as the item is moving forward, it would not be subject to the limitation. And that if there was kind of a gridlock, that the status quo would stay until new information was available to then come back to the board to aid in trying to find a resolution to the matter. Because this has happened with the issues on AB 127, the 6% increase. There's been no resolution on that issue, and we're working on new information to then bring it back to the board to aid in a resolution.
Okay, what was the problem we were trying to solve by saying an item may be set on the agenda no more than 3 times? What kinds of items?
I will give you an example of one, perhaps, and I'm not saying it happens very often, and I'm not sure it's ever happened while I've been on this board, but I was warned coming in that matters never get resolved at the SAB, in large part because of the issues we've just talked about, but more importantly, the idea of form shopping until you get 6 votes. So you set something and whoops, the 2 or 3 you were counting on are not there. You suddenly ask that it be withdrawn, and
So this is more like appeals?
It's like gaming the system.
it's like gaming the system.
So this would be like not a policy matter, but a matter regarding an allocation for a specific district?
Could be.
Could be anything, but it's more often is that or an appeal. I'm guessing. I think that was the intent of this.
Yeah, I wrote appeals ? Because I wasn't sure. Okay,
So I think,
could we say an appeal?
well,
What is it you're worried that this will inhibit?
Okay, I'm worried that the 10th time seismic comes up. Somebody says, well, we don't want to deal with this, and it's come up more than 3 times. Well, every time we needed new information or we needed something or staff didn't get to it, or they did get to it, but they didn't quite get to it, right? And so it seems to me that it opens the door to very strange interpretation.
Well, for me, being from a school board, I shouldn't even say this in public, but, I had people that kept bringing the same thing over and over and over, and basically what happened was that the board's time got used up on that issue, and the more pressing priority things never got done because they kept bringing things up. So we had to adopt a rule like this. But that the board...
This was like a board member?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get real specific, but I wasn't... Sometimes the one lone vote would just... And so... So what they would have to do is they would have to prove that there was new information available or any of the below. In other words, in teachers' language, you had to be able to bring your excuse. And your excuse had to be something everybody had already agreed on. You couldn't just put everybody in an endless cycle.
Right.
And that way, there can't be gaming where they're looking, saying, okay, this week that person's not coming and I know they won't vote for me, but this week that person is coming, they will, and or keep bringing it up. So I don't know. I'm more leaning toward no more than 3 times. However, adding to the list of excuses, I'm more than happy to do to be sure that we get all of your concerns met. But that's just because of my experience, and it doesn't really apply to this board as much. I mean, this is not a school board. Mm-hmm. So theoretically, the audience can't bring issues, so it would have to be one of our board members or a staff member. They kept bringing one up repeatedly, right?
Right.
And I guess we could just tell that person we didn't want them to do it anymore.
Yeah. Ms. Jones, did you have something to add? You came to the table. May I inquire?
I do. I would just say that you shouldn't just limit yourself to appeals on this. It should also be for bigger global items. Because some of those items
It won't bite. There's something flying in the...
A butterfly moth, something, and
some of the global items are much too difficult sometimes to resolve in one meeting. And
Yeah.
you may have to have public comment. You may have to have just board discussion on a meeting. And if you limit yourself to no more than 3 times, then you never really get to the gist of it and resolve it. So I would caution you.
But we do have, I think, five things that make it not counting. No
Yeah.
quorum, SCB member request to put over, district not able to attend,
Mm-hmm.
district and OPSC both agree that the item should be withdrawn, so it's not unilateral, and the staff analysis is not distributed at least 72 hours prior to the meeting. Those would not count against your limit.
Correct.
Those would be the excuses.
and then also there is the excuse of unless new information is available.
That's the overarching one.
Yeah, which I think when items are
Well,
continued.
then what if staff just doesn't do it? So there's no new information available. I mean, to me, you do not want to have any way a system could be gamed so something could be kicked off because of a 3 times and you're out rule.
Well, we could have a waiver provision if a majority of the board says it can go back on.
No. How do we just deal with the fact that if seismic comes up month after month, as has happened, and the information isn't adequate, and
Well, if it doesn't get 6 votes, then it has to be brought back, right?
Or if there is no, one of it was to look at with Biggs. Biggs came back several times. It could have continuously it failed. This was an item that was brought back, I think, 3 times until ultimately the issue passed. And that was kind of an appeal situation. But with seismic, I think I'm pretty confident with this board and you, Senator Hancock, that if an item that you feel that staff is delaying on will public chastising and requesting that items be brought to the board for new information and that it's unacceptable.
And once we get our arms around reconsideration, it'll take care of the example you give, because there's been a couple where the motion has failed and then it gets put back on the next agenda, and it fails, it gets put back on the next agenda. So we should have a process if something fails to have a way of getting it back on, if appropriate, but not just continue it.
What if we added staff analysis is not complete or distributed?
or I was going to say staff analysis is not deemed complete.
By the board, that's fine.
Or another thing would be simply that we don't get to it, everybody's tired. They say at 7 o'clock, I'm leaving.
Well, that would be, I think that would be number 2. We would put it over. I mean, I think I would use number 2. And that's happened. We have continued items because we're tired.
Okay.
And maybe if it to clarify is SAB requests to put item over or item is not heard.
Exactly. And it's not an individual member, it's the collective decision because we didn't have time or we got tired or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, item not heard is good.
Okay.
Yeah. Item not
And
heard.
that would be good. And then how about another one that would say more information is requested by the board?
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah, I think that's a great one.
Okay. Okay, so if we do that, we agree?
We agree.
Yay. Good. Anything else on that page? Or do we move to where it says staff analysis? On the next page, does anybody have any comments on that?
Do we have to use the term material? I don't know if we want to begin to decide what's material. To me, a letter should count, email should count, study should count. I mean...
Where do you see that?
I'm sorry, I jumped down under...
Material information.
implying that someone's determining what's material and what's not. It seems to me anything that's coming to us should come. If the staff analysis has to be here 72 hours, any other relevant information, whether it's a letter, whether it is an email, whether it is what have you. It's just information, not material information. I mean, again, was there some reason why the term material was used?
It was in the prior version, and I just adopted.
I mean, I don't think we should deny anybody the right to comment to us. All the voices should be heard.
That would be fine with me.
But it should be done in a timely fashion, not the day of the meeting. I mean, I will be very blunt. I am one who has high expectations for staff to meet a deadline, and then we often get letters handed to us at the meeting. And all the relevant stuff we should have as we are pondering and discussing should be in our hands 72 hours before.
Should the title maybe read information and or comments on agenda items?
About just agenda item information.
Agenda item information. I mean, if people can say whatever they're going to say at the meeting, but it's the stuff that comes to us.
And then I can just strike the word material.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I think we might have public comment on this.
Oh, thank you. Lyle Smoot, Los Angeles Unified School District. I just wanted to point out, I have no problem with the conversation you just had. The concern I have is the staff analysis being 72 hours in advance and potentially any response to that staff analysis also being required 72 hours in advance. That just doesn't work. I mean, a district needs more than 5 minutes or whatever that works out to be to respond to it. So I would hope that somehow or other, I realize all these things are difficult, but I would hope that the staff analysis would have to be provided to the district at least 3 days before the district's timeline to respond. And I think most of the time, if not all the time, well, not all the time, but a lot of the time, the information you're going to get that is now subject to a 72-hour rule is going to be provided by the staff. I mean, in response to something that was provided by the staff at the same time. So there's just no time to respond. If you get your board write-up and then you want to respond to it, there's no time built in here. So I would hope I would ask you to change that staff analysis to double that, or even better would be 5 working days prior to the board day.
I'm open to that. I'd like to hear what staff has to say. Ms. Jones, do you have any comment on that?
We do have the agenda online, posted online the week before the State Allocation Board meeting. So that information is available to the districts. The other thing is, as an internal practice, once the binders have been delivered to the board members, then staff is allowed to go ahead and submit or fax to the districts their items that are under special consent tab as well as under special appeals.
And when does that normally happen?
And that happens as soon as the books have been delivered to the board members.
Which
Okay,
is
which
how many
is-
days?
Which is
in advance?
7 days.
So 5 days would work, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
The one thing that maybe we should have to caveat, because we've had this happen since I've been the AEO, is a caveat of if you can have 5 working days, but maybe say if analysis is not provided, prior to this, because we've gotten items on Monday or Tuesday before the board meeting, and I think we need to allow districts to turn in,
Yeah, but
their
under this
responses.
rule, we couldn't do that. If it wasn't done 72 hours, it would have to be continued, and I think that's what it should be. It's fairer for everybody to have adequate notice about what is going to be said and what the recommendations are. So I'm comfortable
With 5 working
days, and then requiring all the response there too to be in our hands 72 hours before.
So would you also like a provision written in if staff analysis is not available 5 days prior to the board meeting, the item is not heard or the item's pulled? Because you've had information put
Yes.
in your binders, Monday
Yes.
and Tuesday before the board meeting.
I would support that. I don't know what you two feel about it.
Well, I just wonder how that would impact districts. It puts their item off for 30 days. And it seems to me, for the same reason I wanted 15 days, I'd like us to be as expeditious as we possibly can.
We'll keep this one open. Can we keep it open?
Well, I'm good with 72 hours. If you're good with 72 hours, or
I am.
And then
Okay.
we move forward and we see how it works, and then I'm open to coming back and looking at it at a later date if you want to open the issue, or whatever you think. I
Okay.
mean, you're saying that we want to go forward by having a shorter time, right? You're saying you want the 72 hours.
But then I thought we were saying that we wanted the information to go out
5 working days.
5 working days.
So staff
ahead of
analysis.
The districts have an
So
opportunity
the
to
districts
respond.
then can respond within 72 hours.
Or we can look at agenda item information, maybe requiring responses 48 hours, taking it down instead of the 72 hours to respond by districts on agenda items, giving them 48 hours, that they have to respond at least 48 hours before.
That's fine.
That would be fine with me.
That's fine with me.
That's fine with me.
Okay, so, yeah, we have another comment.
Richard Gonzalez of Richard Gonzalez and Associates, addressing this particular issue, specifically appeals by school districts. As you've heard from Lisa Jones, that once the board has been given their board book, staff's authorized to provide the items to the district. Why can't the draft item be provided to the school district in advance of that, so we know we have a consent item or we don't have a consent item? Or we have a special consent, or we have a opposition. So the district has more than just the 5 days to work on it. I'm sure staff has initial drafts of it, or at least an initial position paper on it. And that brings everything closer to the district and OPSC knowing what's before them, and they be able to respond in a timely manner.
Remind me what the process is on an appeal. I mean, I thought districts spent a lot of time with staff talking about the framework of the appeal. It isn't like you get something out of a black hole. There's a lot of give and take, and sometimes you resolve it. It doesn't even have to even go to the board. So I'm one that says a draft is just that. Until staff is comfortable making a final recommendation and giving it to the board, it should be the purview of staff. It's public once the board has it, and then that should be the signal to send it to whomever.
I agree with you that there is give and take. There is discussions before and after during some of these very difficult types of appeal items. That does continue to go on. However, I will share that there are still times, even after that discussion is made, that the district isn't quite sure how it's going to be written, and then ends up, and it has happened where the district speaks to the board and says, well, we hadn't seen this language. We don't know what this means to us. We need to analyze that to make sure we know what that really means. And I'm sharing with you that this can be solved by having that draft before the school district, ahead of the 5 days. They can look at it. Yes, it's not a final version, it's stamped draft. I will share that I used to work at OPSC, and at that time, we did provide draft versions. They were stamped draft. We asked the district to make a comment for it, and it was usually the week or so before the state allocation board meeting. And we made them available to them so they could have an early view of it before it became public and a final version.
Well,
I'd like to run with 5 days until we see that it doesn't work.
Okay.
still. So we'll require the response within 72 working days or
No,
40?
72 hours.
72 hours.
No, the response, I think we said the response 48 hours, to
Yeah,
just
the
give them another extra day.
48
That's
hours.
fine, too.
And that they will get the material
5 days.
5 working days ahead
Prior.
of time. Okay, good. We'll put that in the draft. Then, moving along, I had one request for clarification on this page also, where it says, any SAB member may request a voice roll call vote on any item.
Which is then, if you can find that on page 5, item E.
It's
For
in
quorum and voting.
and voting.
Right, it's item E.
Yeah. Item E, I am assuming we will generally have a voice vote. Sometimes, like we're doing right now, or I think that the chairs have always done, they'll say, is this a consensus?
Right.
And that's when some member can say, no, I want a voice vote. I want a
Roll call?
A roll call. But generally speaking, we're going to decide things by roll call votes. So why do we say that? It makes it seem like, generally speaking, we're not going to have roll calls, but somebody's going to have to call for one if they want it. Generally, motions are made and seconded. Do we say that anywhere here, actually?
No.
May never take without a second to the motion is required on all motions. Motions may be made by any of the members. Okay, requiring a vote upon establishment of a unanimous roll call. Consent items may be acted on by a single vote.
What's that process where you say without objection will count the prior
Yeah.
roll call?
Yeah, that's the unanimous roll call.
so
Once
that
you
can do-
establish
so it's-
that, you
You're
can
not doing
continue
it
that.
just on consent. You would have the ability to, without objection, use it on other
So
items.
I can strike the word consent.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah. So then why do we need this other one unless we just put it up there in the same thing? Any member may request a roll call vote. But anyway, I think it clarifies a little bit.
Yep.
Generally
Yep.
speaking, we're going to operate.
And this does make it plain that it is 6.
Right.
Like we did
Yes.
before.
Right.
So on item E, how do you want that redrafted?
I would put item E up under number D and renumber the next two,
Okay.
making it clear, but you don't have to establish a unanimous roll call. Anybody, how does one get established? Well, generally, at least in the Senate, if there's been a unanimous roll call previously, the president of the Senate will say, can we put in the previous roll call? But then members will frequently say, no, voice vote,
Yeah.
we need to vote, roll call. So it would allow
Okay.
that to happen.
I will move that under D.
Yeah, just as a little clarification. Okay. Moving along, on the next page, did you have anything, Mr. Harvey? I had one thing on the composition of the working groups.
Yeah, I have some comments there as well.
Okay, why don't you come in?
It seems to me on the composition, the chair of the subcommittee should set the agenda. I'm not sure that's called out here. I also just raise rhetorically, who staffs the subcommittees? I mean, is that something that should be equally shared? OPS duty? I mean, I think right now our assistant executive officer is pulling that heavy duty, and I don't know if there is some feeling about who that should be. I raised it as just a question. We're silent on who staffs it. And I have no strong feelings either way. But Ms. Jones is here again, offering our institutional memory.
Right.
I would say that I think that the chair should set the agenda and that the assistant executive officer should be the one to help with the items that are part of that agenda.
Okay?
OPSC can provide support to the assistant executive officer if she requires it.
Okay.
But we do notice the meetings for the subcommittee, so I don't want it not to look like we don't have, that we're not part of this function, because we are.
I didn't mean to imply that, but
I could not do this without her.
all right.
So I just wanted to say,
Cooperation and
yes.
compliments. Very good. Okay.
Yeah.
So we do agree then that the chair should set the agenda, the chair of the subcommittee should set the agenda, and we've now got a working
Certainly.
relationship for how the staffing works, and we're part of Begley Keene, so it's noticed.
Okay, excellent.
Working groups, are we there?
Working groups, yeah, I just wanted to suggest where it says membership on the working group will be determined by, and Ms. Kaplan had suggested in our conversation that it say the authorizing entity, in other words, by the full SAB, if that was setting it up, or if it was a working group of a subcommittee, or if it was a working group of staff. Working groups have no power except to brainstorm, talk things through, help us with the background information and give it to us, so people who ask for one know what they need.
Exactly, and I think that also allows us the flexibility to ensure where you need technical expertise, they are available. And
Yeah.
very good. The only other thing I would request under sub B of that, duties, it talks about working groups shall perform the duties assigned to them and shall report on all matters referred to them if created by, and it says a subcommittee. Can we say by the board or a subcommittee? Because we might have some of these working groups created by the board itself, making your point that the membership's determined by the authorizing, that could be the full board.
Okay, yes. That
Yes,
Sounds
I can
really
do that.
good. And
Procedural guidelines, eh?
procedural guidelines.
And then on the procedural guidelines, you can just delete my underline. That underline was, I duplicated it. That's actually under the final arbiter. So it's just supposed to spell out in procedural guidelines that we are, the authority is the California Senate rules with a default to Masons.
Okay.
And then the very final is the resolution, these rules shall remain in effect until replaced or revised by a majority of the board.
That's pretty standard.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that I potentially missed?
The only thing, and again, I may be the solo voice in this, and I don't feel particularly strongly about it, except I do believe it was useful when I was on the city council, and that is we may want to, at some point in one of our future agendas, talk about this infamous ex parte issue, which is when you are lobbied privately, you at least prior to the vote on that matter, let your colleagues know that you were visited by so-and-so and so-and-so. You don't have to indicate what was discussed, but it's just a way of transparency. It lets people know who visited you. It was a very common practice, at least it was in the Southern California area where I served. So I don't know. I mean, I just bring it up as something for us to potentially talk about.
I think it's certainly something for us to talk about.
Where would we put it?
Where would we put it?
Let's see.
Testimony on agenda items? I don't know.
Yeah, it would work there.
Where do we see testimony on agenda items?
Page 5.
And actually, we're looking at the
No, we're
for
looking at-
subcommittee.
Oh,
Pink
for
tab.
subcommittee.
Pink tab.
Yeah.
I guess we could do it order of binder items because you would be doing it on the binder. You do it on the matter. I mean, it could be at the next subcommittee meeting. process for agendas. I think next subcommittee, it fits neater there than the other ones.
Yes, I can add that.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, now, I believe, I think the next item is public comment, but I did hope that we could adopt this document as amended, and we can't because we don't have a quorum.
By direction, we have certainly asked for things to be done, correct? So it will
Yeah.
be as we've worked through it.
We can adopt it as a subcommittee, keep the roll open, and maybe somebody will come
Well,
back.
that's
do you
what I
think?
was thinking. I was actually going to see if Ms. Brownlee said if we needed to take more votes, she would be here. And I don't know where Ms. Fuller went. Can you call their offices and just see if they could come down and we could just do this formally? You know, we're trying to set off on the right foot here.
I understand.
And it would just take a minute. It would just take a minute. And then while we're waiting for that, we can go into public comment.
Oh, thank you. Lyle Smoot, LA Unified again. Actually, there's two things I would ask of you. At the last meeting, I think you talked about an annual reaffirmation of the rules or something, and this says it's just in effect until revised. I think maybe every other year in the cycles of the legislative cycles. I think the legislature readopts the rules every other year.
Oh, yeah, we do.
And I think that would be a great thing. It creates an opportunity. I think for us, it creates an opportunity to at least have the item on the agenda for potential discussion. That's number one. And number two, actually, I should have come forward earlier. It's not a big deal, but under the meetings, it would be nice if you could just specify that meetings are normally held the fourth Wednesday of the month, but can be changed or whatever, I mean, it creates a statement of continuity that I think is important.
Oh, I want to do them on Fridays.
Friday afternoon at 5 is fine with me, but
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thank you. I think both of those are good suggestions.
I think they're great
I mean,
suggestions.
we do readopt our committee rules every year, and we could do this maybe at the beginning of every session or something. Sure. We don't. Great. Additional public comment.
Eric Bakke, Los Angeles Unified.
Wait a minute, one bite of the apple here.
I know,
What is
I
this?
know.
Are we
There's like
gonna have
7
a
more of us in
sequence?
the hall.
Perfect.
I should have come up as well. I was just kind of reading and trying to understand it myself. Under the quorum and voting section, in the first paragraph near the bottom, it says the SAB shall hold open roll call until a meeting is adjourned for final action. It makes sense to do that, but down near the bottom, under F, it says at such time a call is lifted, a quorum must be present to finalize the item. I know some of these meetings run really late. If you've made a vote on an item, we don't have a quorum at the end of the day. Does the vote not count anymore, or do we have to hold the item over till the following month? So I wanted to see how that scenario gets worked through, because otherwise we just keep pushing an item along if we don't actually have a quorum. And so the question is it really necessary to have the quorum at the end if you already made your vote at the time the subject was being discussed? So I just wanted to throw that out there as an item for discussion.
Good point. No, that's a very good point. Thank you. I mean, that is certainly in committees in the legislature, which I'm assuming operate under Masons.
And I just kind of lifted this from Masons so we can make it work for the SAB. There was no thought process behind this.
I would say you could do it unless it benefited LA, and then
I don't see a problem in deleting it. Because the only people that are going to show up at the very end are the ones that need to vote on an issue.
If it's like what we've done in committee where some of us voted and then left and some other people added on,
Yeah,
I think that's fine, don't you?
I do too. Yeah, you don't need the whole majority sitting there every time you lift a call.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Okay, does that have consensus? Okay. So I would entertain a motion that we...
Motion.
Okay.
I will second.
Senator Hancock?
And
Yes.
Oh, okay. Aye.
Scott Harvey?
Aye.
Assemblywoman Fuller? Motion passes 3-0 as to adopt the rules as amended.
Oh, excellent. And I want to thank the staff for their work in putting this together. You did a great job, and we will continue. If we could distribute this simply as an informational item
And I will
to the
gather,
board and on the internet, so that we can they can familiarize themselves with it, and then we will fill in the rest of the details at our subsequent meetings for a final adoption after we get it all done.
And I will continue to work with staff on setting the next meetings, but it looks like, for the most part, Tuesdays, 3:30 to 5.
Okay, excellent.
Except for budget, which we know.
Yeah.
It could come up at any time.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming and remaining, and Ms. Kaplan and Ms. Jones for your invaluable help in getting this pulled together.
And honestly, I could not do this without Lisa Jones, just so you know.
I'm sure.